Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Travis here for another walk and talk. I apologize for the extremely dim light. Tomorrow I've got to work a night shift up in Flagstaff, so I'm staying up real late tonight so I can sleep in tomorrow because the production work's going to start at 8 p.m. and could go 8 hours, 9 hours after that. So I want to make sure I'm plenty rested. Anyways, I'm going to walk over here to a street light here in a second. Normally, my little walk and talk videos are, about some type of anecdote from my life, from my past. I've got a lot of really great stories, but in the last couple days, I've been having these arguments on Facebook, and they're kind of political, so I thought I'd take a second to talk about them just a little bit. So, for context, one of my friends on Facebook made a post. Had to do with the Women's March on Washington, which is I think a good event. I think it's really important that people get out there and, make their voices heard and protest peacefully. This is America, but specifically, I forget the name of the celebrity, but one of them made a comment that, Viagra and Rogaine aren't taxed, but tampons are taxed, and that's an example of what's wrong with America. And just the stupidness of that argument, and then the way that some people, some of my friends on Facebook and their friends and friends of friends, this thread in that I'm talking about ended up getting rather large and had a huge number of likes and everything. But I'm going to tell you why I think that's stupid, why I think it's a counterproductive argument to make, and how it's kind of indicative of the problems with political discourse in America today. So first off, let's break down this argument. I'm an engineer, I'm a logical guy. So they say Viagra and Rogaine are tax-free, and feminine hygiene products are not tax-free. So let's analyze this. First off, Viagra, which is a prescription, which treats ED, which is erectile dysfunction, is a prescription pill. Like all prescription drugs, it is tax-free. It's not a unique thing for Viagra. Birth control, painkillers, heart medicine, all these things, they are 100% tax-free. That's just the way it is. Feminine hygiene products are sold over the counter. You can buy them anywhere. They're sold right next to cotton swabs and Q-tips and Band-Aids and aspirin. And these things are typically taxed with sales tax, which is set by the state. 40 states in America tax feminine hygiene products. Of the 10 that don't, a good portion of those are states that don't have a sales tax. And the other ones that don't, the legislators of those states brought forward, special bills to exempt those particular products from taxes. And from my research, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that there has never been legislation put forward to exempt feminine hygiene products from taxes that has failed to pass. But according to my wife, feminine hygiene products cost about $20 a month on average, thereabouts. Sales tax can be a couple percent to maybe like 8-9%. I don't know, maybe in some places it could be 10% in some of those super high tax areas. So, we're talking, let's call it $1 to $2 a month in taxes. Now, like I've said in previous videos, I lean libertarian. I'm not a big fan of taxes, especially things that, people need. So, as far as I'm concerned, if someone said to me, hey, did you know that feminine hygiene products are taxed? And that's really unfair because, millions of women, most all women for decades of their life need these to, function and get about their daily lives. And I'd be like, I never thought about that. And I 100% agree. We shouldn't tax that. These women need that. Why are we taxing something that's needed to live? We don't tax food except for in like 4 states. I don't know why they do in those states. There's a few counties and cities as well, but for the most part, things you need to live are not taxed. So that would have been a good argument, I think. Now, tying in Rogaine to that as well, this is one of the things I was like, man, this argument is really stupid. Rogaine is taxed in 42 states, so 2 additional states beyond what feminine hygiene products are taxed by Rogaine. Again, a lot of those states that don't tax it is because they don't have sales tax, and I believe there might be a couple states that made an exemption for it because it used to be a prescription, and probably someone who used it wrote letters to the legislator and they wrote a tax exemption. So that's the first problem with this, right? Secondly, to equate you paying an extra $1 or $2 a month for products as being oppression, and then comparing it to a pill that I just Googled this the other day, Viagra costs $60 a pill, which is super expensive. Then I went and looked at my insurance plan. I was like, if I had ED, I don't, I'm a young guy, maybe someday when I'm super old, I hope not, but at least there's a treatment for it. But at $60 a pill, and my insurance would cover almost none of that. So I'd have to pay $60 a pill anytime you wanted to have any type of sexual function. And you basically have to pay that until your deductible is met, which some people's deductibles are massive. Luckily, mine's not very big. I have fantastic insurance. I work for a really good company. But a lot of people don't have that, so it's extremely expensive. But that's not kind of where... that's just, I can understand, this has got an emotional appeal. You're like, this thing for guys, they don't tax, but and that's not even like, it's not even all guys, but almost all women need this, so why are we taxing it? But it's not an apples to apples comparison. If, for example, prescription pills were taxed, and there was a special exemption made for Viagra, and let's say that birth control, another prescription drug, didn't have or did have tax, that would be a pretty dang good, if someone was outraged at that, I'd be like, yeah, you know what, actually that's not very fair, only a small number of guys proportionally need this drug and they get a tax exemption, but then birth control, which is probably more similar to Viagra than feminine hygiene products, at least they both relate to sex. Feminine hygiene products have nothing to do with sex. That would kind of be an equivalent argument of a similar thing and a real kind of instance of perhaps sexism in the tax code. But this argument doesn't have any of that. But these arguments got worse. The post in question was someone basically saying, pardon my language, they're super upset that our society cares more about the pleasure of men's penises and that Viagra is not necessary. Even some people making claims that ED is a made-up condition and that, pharmaceuticals do all this research on fixing boners and not doing more important things for women, which is also nonsense because Viagra was discovered while they were doing research on a drug that would, affect blood pressure in a certain way. And by the time they got to human clinical trials, the test subjects reported, some side effects that were interesting. People getting erections that hadn't had them in a long time and saying, keep giving me these things, they're fantastic. But anyways, the shaming of male sexuality and the framing something that should just be a simple tax issue of saying, hey, a lot of people use these, a lot of people use feminine hygiene products, and we shouldn't have to pay a tax on something like that, and then making it like a man versus women conversation is just, I already broke down why it's a logically foolish argument, but let's now talk about as far as persuasiveness. It accomplishes really nothing. The whole point of bringing these things up is to bring attention to, inequality between women and men, which, does exist. I'm 100% for equal rights, and I want women to have, all the exact same rights and opportunities as I have. You won't find an argument for me there. But to poke at men and saying like that the fact that some men want to be able to perform sexually is a bad thing is really how it's being framed, which is really messed up. I mean, it's not just about this individual guy who's needing, medication to treat his ED. It's also about their partner. As they say, it takes two to tango. So it's not just affecting one person. And yeah, you're not going to die from having ED, but good Lord, I mean, quality of life means something. There's a lot of medications people get that treat things they're not going to die from. I mean, think if there's like mental disorders and all kinds of different things that just make your life, pain management. You can live with pain, but God, it sucks. Living without sex, it sucks. Why would you do it when you can, not do that, when you can get treatment with, the wonders of modern medicine? We live in a fantastic age. So, my comments on this thread, I try not to be combative, especially with friends on Facebook. My family and my friends and their parents, everyone sees this stuff. So I try to follow the rule of like anything I say on the internet, even when I'm posting anonymously, I try to say something that if all of a sudden it was on the front page of the newspaper the next day, I would feel confident in like defending my stance. Or if my grandma were to read it, I would be okay defending it. I mean, sometimes I say things that my grandma probably wouldn't like, but that's just the generation divide. But I say it in a way to where at least it is not in an attacking manner. So, as someone who considers myself, an ally of women's rights, I mean, God, me and my wife work in construction, totally kind of male-dominated industry. My wife is heading up an affinity group for our company to, promote women in construction and to help, change the culture of the construction industry to be, more open and welcoming and supportive of women. And, so I'm totally, that's something that's close and near and dear to my heart. I want my wife to be able to succeed as easily as I can succeed. We work in the same industry. We work at the same company, oftentimes in the same projects, And I've seen a couple times where she's had to deal with sexism, and usually it's the people who are doing it. They don't even realize, there's with these industries that have been, primarily male only for so long, they're oftentimes not even aware. There's a pattern. There's like, they're just kind of going through the way they've always done things. They see a woman who maybe on most construction projects would be, say, a secretary, and then they approach her as if she's a secretary, and she's not. She's a quality specialist, which is a pretty important job. And, she has to deal with that. And sometimes she gets frustrated. She does a fantastic job of handling it and approaching it the right way. Sometimes you got to get a little firm and kind of interrupt that pattern. But then it's about, realizing these are people you work with. And I'm not talking about people at my company. I mean, when you're doing construction, you're working with a lot of different parties, subcontractors, owners, suppliers, inspectors, just a whole gambit of people. It's a big team project, team effort to put together a construction project. Anyways, so I'm making these replies, and just like I explained a second ago how it's a bad argument, I was like, hey, and I had never really thought about, taxes of prescriptions and feminine hygiene products, but, I went ahead and researched it and looked it up, and, I kind of had that, didn't pass a smell test when I first heard it, so I went ahead and researched it all. I was like, hey, this is a bad argument. So I kind of just broke down. I was like, hey, get where you're coming from, but this is a really bad argument, and also the way you phrased it is kind of like attacking the fact that Viagra exists, or, saying it that, people don't even really need Viagra because it's a made-up disease and all this nonsense. I was like, this is just, it's bad and counterproductive. Like, who do you think this argument's going to sway. I mean, it's such a bad argument, and it's so antagonistic towards men, the way that they phrased it. It's like, this is, in fact, this isn't, I mean, and I'm, like I said, I'm 100% for women's rights, you know? But and the way they framed it was like pissing off me, you know? And not only that, like, I'm totally fine with in fact, I'm 100% for getting rid of feminine hygiene product sales tax. Gone. Get rid of it. It's dumb. I mean, now that like I said before, legislators put it forward and it passed every time, but it was such a small tax, it's probably just never really been pushed on legislators by, their constituents. So I have a feeling it's going to change. But anyway, so I was like, why would you make an argument like this of all the different wrongs and all the different, struggles that women face compared to men? Why are you comparing feminine hygiene products to one, Viagra, which doesn't really make sense, and then Rogaine, which is taxed in more states than feminine hygiene products? It doesn't make any sense just because some celebrity says it, and you get all outraged and go on Facebook and get, 200 likes and, 150 comments of all these people supporting. So, and like, I'm a little heated now because, as you'll see in a second, some of the responses I got to what I was trying to do were a little ridiculous. So I said, hey, it's a bad argument, listed out the reasons, and said, it's about, if we want to make change, we've got to be, convincing. We've got to persuade people that there's a problem. We've got to give examples of where the problems are. Maybe, provide some potential solutions. Or at the minimum, make awareness to the real problem so that at least people can start thinking about how to make solutions. But to make a fake problem that's, and making it in such an antagonizing way to male sexuality, I think is going to alienate a lot of people that you would be trying to persuade. So, I kind of laid it out in a nice way, said this is why it's wrong. This might be a better argument, yada yada. And immediately I start getting replies, oh, typical white man, mansplaining, this and that. You don't have any right to speak on stuff like this. I'm like, well, first off, I'm talking about, the facts that are, of the argument itself. Those aren't subjective. That's an objective thing. Those are just facts, That's not a gender-specific opinion. But then also I was kind of like, I had heard of people, mansplaining and, you're a cisgendered white man. You guys have, you've had your time where things are your way and you need to just shut up and listen and, listen to what we're saying and not try to, tell us what to think. And I was like, my God, my whole life, and my generation and younger, we've been brought up in a society where we're taught that you shouldn't ever, judge or discriminate or dismiss someone based on, race or gender or, sexual orientation, sometimes to a lesser extent sexual orientation. But, and here I am, and it's like people are doing that exact same thing to me. And also my brother, who was he tried to inject some positivity in the conversation because, a lot of these people were, really, really upset. You could just, read in their comments, you can tell they're really angry. And he's like, hey, things, get it, you're mad, we've got a ways to go on gender rights, but, think on the positive, and, this is the best time ever to be a woman in the world in regards to, equal rights and gender equality. And then, all these people jumped down his throat and started saying, oh, typical man to say this, and, you're not an authority on that. And I replied back to them. My brother kind of like pulled back. He's like, oh man, this is a very negative thread. And he always makes very, very positive points. He's very opinionated, but he stays pretty positive. in the way that he types and communicates. Mostly, sometimes he goes off the, sometimes he gets pissed. But anyways, this wasn't one of those instances. And so, I mean, I just asked him, I was like, okay, so you said he's a man and he can't make that assessment. I was like, well, can you name a place and a time in history anywhere in the world that it's better than it is now? Because, good Lord, I sure can't think of one. And yeah, we've got a long ways to go. I know there's people talk about gender equality. Some people say a woman makes, 74 cents on the dollar. And then, other people will counter, oh, well, if you look at specific jobs and, numbers of hours worked and education level and how many hours you put in a week, that equates for a lot of it. But, even still, we've got about a 5 to 7% difference in the wage gap, which, it's trending to go away. I think it will eventually. But, I mean, 5-7%, that still matters, I mean, we still got to deal with that. And then, in certain industries, financial advisement, I think, women make like less than 70% on the dollar. And then, my wife's part of this affinity group where she's doing all this research on, women and industry and stuff like that. And I think she said of like the top 100 or the top 200 companies in America, there's like 4 women CEOs or something like that. My numbers might be a little bit off, but it's small. It's like a low single digit percentage, like 2% or 4% or something like that. So that's not very good either. So yeah, we got ways to go, and there's a lot of true, real things that we can talk about, and a lot of tremendously persuasive arguments that people can make. But it seems that certain kind of echo chambers of the internet, where this like really extreme, kind of third wave feminist, social justice warrior, down with the patriarchy, men and cisgender people are scum and white people are bad, is starting to hit the mainstream, unfortunately. I'd only seen it in certain enclaves of the internet, certain corners of certain sites, but now I'm starting to see people I know who are using this same rhetoric in just your normal kind of Facebook discourse. I mean, it really seems like all political kind of discourse has gone bonkers the last year. I mean, this election was real rough, and you got a lot of people who are super pissed off about Trump, and you've got just and then some Trump supporters are also just way to one side. You got the people against it way to the other. And it's like we've stopped trying to convince people that our way is correct. It's turned into oh, you don't think like I do? You were a horrible person. You were this, you were that. I mean, it goes to both sides, depending on what it is they're calling you. But I mean, if you say you're for this, oh, you're racist or you're sexist, and that doesn't make any sense, and it really bothers me when they make those conclusions about you, based on your skin color or your gender. I mean, it's so hypocritical for people who are trying to, work for gender equality and, racial harmony and equality, to then decide if your opinion or if your statement is valid based on those criteria. That's kind of the dark side of identity politics. People say they don't want to be judged as being groups, but then they want to lump everyone into these groups at the same time, which doesn't really help anyone. So I don't want this video to get too long, so I'm going to walk back here. But at the end of my videos, I always try to give kind of and the lesson of this story is, I guess the lesson of this is, when you're engaged in political discourse, don't just virtue signal to your friends and post about how outraged something makes you and how horrible these people who think this way are, so that you can show how good you are, because you're so good that look at how much this offends you, because that doesn't accomplish anything except for like I said, virtue signaling to your friends. It doesn't affect change. It doesn't persuade people to your side. It's just a big circle jerk, basically, as they say on the internet. Everyone with the same opinion, just feeding off each other, creating straw man arguments, and kind of like, little pinatas to whack with these fake art. Oh, this people believe this. Yeah, they're horrible. But no one said that. You're the one who said that. So don't do that. If you really want to affect change in the world, and you want to make the world better, then we have to formulate logical, true arguments that can be absorbed and influence those people who don't think like you. And by saying everyone who thinks like this is a sexist, racist, bigot, horrible person, these people that then hear that maybe think the thing that you're saying, that if you think that makes you this way, and they're like, well, no, I'm not a sexist, I'm not a racist, very likely they're not. And I say, well, this person's stupid. And because you've said something stupid or false, the whole Rogaine thing, right? For most people, like, Rogaine's taxed in 42 states. That whole argument's dumb, Whereas you're just like, hey, we shouldn't tax this because we need it. They might have been like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You start throwing all this bullshit on it. You start attacking men and making bad logical arguments. And then you give them this kind of ammo to dismiss your entire argument. So you gotta be kind. You gotta have a little bit of empathy. You gotta imagine who it is that you're trying to persuade to your way of thought, and engage in a way that's a dialogue and not a diatribe, or freaking just screaming at someone and saying you're horrible. Like, what do you expect them to do? Prostrate themselves and say, oh, I'm sorry. I never realized I was a horrible bigot, racist, asshole, sexist who's trying to keep everyone down. No one's going to do that. And maybe one or two people, but not enough to actually get the things you want changed. And in fact, you alienate people. And then they, people who could have been allies. I mean, like me, I'm totally an ally of women's rights. In fact, I'm totally for getting rid of the tax on feminine hygiene products. I go in and just point out some bad logic, and all of a sudden I'm a horrible person, and I should shut up because I'm a man and I'm white. And goddamn, that sucks. Pisses me off. So, don't make bad arguments. Don't alienate allies, and try to actually be persuasive and kind. Honey, not vinegar, attracts more flies, as they say. It's an axiom for a reason. It's true. Anyways, I ended up ranting for way longer than I meant. Almost 30 minutes. Sorry to not be telling a really funny anecdote from my past. The next one I do will be something like that. But, I've been stewing on this for a few days, so I thought I'd make a video. Anyways, thanks for watching to all of the 3 people who actually watch my videos. Have a good night.